start this sermon by sharing some moments in my spiritual life, in my spiritual journey that I had through over 20 years ago when I started taking my Christian life more seriously and wanting to become a better Christian. So I've got a couple of books here that I want to show you. Some of them maybe you will like. So I went through a phase where I was just buying devotional books, I was reading my Bible, and I was finding it much less interesting than the pastor's sermons, and I didn't know why. So I just had to get to look why people were reading their Bibles and taking so much interesting stuff about it. And I read my Bible, and I was kind of a little bit depressed because my devotionals were not as interesting as other people. So there was a phase where I started just buying devotionals. This is an old book that I have, probably know it in English, about Bill Hybels and don't have enough time to pray. So it was a moment that I felt really embarrassed that I didn't really pray that long. It was very short. It was almost something that I had to almost time and force myself to do it slowly. So this was a moment that I wanted to work a little bit on that area. It was given to me because I'm really not very organized, but I didn't know how to manage my time very wisely. I tried. I'm not very good with spiritual disciplines because I couldn't help fixing my schedule. So it was like kind of some easy steps to walk me through it. So I was trying to go on, and here I have some, as a typical Presbyterian, I was gifted this book like, Learn to Control Your Emotions. You have them. You're more than just a brain. And I have also here one of those fancy Bibles, read the whole Bible in 1 year plans. So I want to show you like kind of these books that I think that are kind of interesting. Most of them are like bestsellers. People recommend them. And this was a moment that when I look back at my life, when I look at my spiritual journey, I saw that I was lacking something. I wanted more, but I didn't know how to do it. I have read in the Bible about sanctification. I have tried it, just like New Year's resolution that you go, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change, I have this plan, I'm going to do these steps. And it just, time after time, it failed. I just cannot remember how many times I said that I was going to take my spiritual life seriously. That this time I was really going to pray every single day. That this time I was going to dedicate every single day to read the Bible. And effort after effort, doesn't matter why, when, eventually it just died. I just drowned, dragged down. And I was desperate to find a healthy spiritual life. I didn't want to be a mediocre Christian. That was not the life I want to live. So I want to share today one text to help those who are struggling in their spiritual journey. Maybe even you're doing great, but there's some area maybe that you're lacking. There's something more. So I want to share one text to help us encourage you to seek God better, more deep. It's going to be 2 Chronicles, chapter 34. We'll follow the example of Josiah and learn what he was described as a good king. 2 Chronicles, chapter 34. Josiah was 8 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 31 years. He did what was right in the eyes of the Lord and walked in the ways of his father David, not turning aside to the right or to the left. It's almost like an epilogue is just going to tell us what his life looked like, and now he's going to start his story properly. In the 8th year of his reign, while he was still young, he began to seek the God of his father David. In his 12th year, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem of high places, Asherah poles, carved idols, and cast image. Under his direction, the altars of the Baals were turned down. He cut to pieces the incense altars that were above them and smashed the Asherah poles, the idols, and the image. These he broke to pieces and scattered over the graves of those who had sacrificed to them. He burned the bones of the priests on their altars, so he purged Judah and Jerusalem. In the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and in the ruins around them, he tore down the altars and the Asherah poles and crushed the idols to powders and cut to pieces all the incense altars throughout Israel. Then he went back to Jerusalem. In the 18th year of Josiah's reign, to purify the land and the temple, he set Shaphan, son of Asaliah, and Maaseiah, the ruler of the city, with Joah, son of Joahaz, the recorder, to repair the temple of the Lord his God. They went to Hilkiah, the high priest, and gave him the money that had been brought into the temple of God, which the Levites, who were the doorkeepers, had collected from the people of Manasseh, Ephraim, and the entire remnant of Israel, and from all the people of Judah and Benjamin, and the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Then they entrusted it to the men appointed to supervise the work on the Lord's temple. These men paid the workers who repaired and restored the temple. They also gave money to the carpenters and builders to purchase dressed stone and timber for joists and beams for the building that the kings of Judah had followed to fall in ruin. The men did the work faithfully. Over them to direct them to them were Yahath and Obadiah, Levites descended from Merari, and Zechariah and Meshullam, descended from Koah. The Levites, all who were skilled in playing the musical instrument, had charge of the laborers and supervised all the workers from job to job. Some of the Levites were secretaries, scribes, and doorkeepers. Heavenly Father, I ask humbly that through the example of Josiah, that we may be encouraged to one more time seek spiritual excellency, that one more time we'll be encouraged to seek you in a deeper sense. We pray in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
So, Josiah's search for God, we start by this first moment, this first text. It says, he seek the God of David. And I like that through this text and how we're going to be studying this, we can see that Josiah searched God in three ways. First of all, internally. Second, externally. And finally, he seek out God actively. So my first argument is internal cleansing. Josiah knew about God, started seeking him, and the first thing he does as a king that is mentioned in this text is that he purged, that he cleansed Judah. I like how the Bible does biography. It starts very simple. This is Josiah. He was a good king. He walked beside God. He seeked him. He was crowned king. And then it just goes to the meat, to the big important part. He started a huge reformation on Judah. Now this is amazing because he was extremely young, as most of us know it. But he began to seek the God of his father David. Just want to pay attention here, because if we read this text too quickly, we may just associate and think that his father was actually David, because the text doesn't say who his father was. But the interesting way that this text is written is that his father was actually one of the worst kings of the land. He became king when he was 8 years old because his father was killed. So he was involved in almost a Game of Thrones conspiracy power struggle. So that's not something you want from a leader, that you want from a king. But Josiah was completely different from the bad king. So I find that this is extremely interesting to just start us, to give us how maybe from a young age he was so different. Maybe it was the relationship with the mother. We'll find that a little bit in the chapter before, but we're not quite certain. We don't know how. So in a parallel, so many times, we don't know how to encourage people to seek God. But there are people who definitely, against all odds, come closer to God. So how do we encourage them? And this job is what the king took 6 years. He started seeking God, and 4 years later, he finally discovered, he finally understood how to do it. And his plan was pretty simple. Everything that was wrong in Israel, they worshiped the other gods. He had to clean them. And this would seem something that maybe would take no time. After all, you're the king, you can make a decree. People are expected to do it. But text tells us that it took him 6 years to clean his land. It was not a huge country. You can see the map of Israel is kind of not that big. And it took him so long to do it. If we think about it, there's just only two options. Or he didn't do it quickly enough, or, like my parent would say, if you want something well done, you have to take your time on it. And I think that this king, Josiah, very carefully went and cleansed the land. That's why I think that the Bible shows him as such a good king. So he went cleaning everything. But why it was so important to take all these Asherah poles, these Baals, these places of worship to other gods? Why it was so important to take it out? And this, I think that for an illustration, I want to spend a little bit of time talking a little bit about myself. Maybe for you it's very common, but in South America there's something that we don't have. And when I came here, I became a little bit crazy with Goodwills, thrift stores, pawn shops, garage sales. There's nothing similar like that. It's like to find something extremely cheap that can be useful. And I was just like driving around the street, it's like garage sale. Doesn't matter the time, I would just stop, try to find the signs. And sadly, sometimes the signs were like a couple of weeks late, and I would just kind of needed to find something. And when I was going through that phase, when I arrived here in the States, then I found something that was like eye-opening. I saw in the TV a show called Hoarders. And wow, that was disgusting. It was like a typhoon passed through a Dollar Trees and just pushed all this huge pile of stuff into somebody's house. It's like, I have to write it down because some of the stuff I saw in that show, it was just too much. There were people who have so many clothes, who bought so many clothes that they put it all on the bed because it didn't fit in the closet anymore. And they didn't sleep on the bed anymore because there was too much clothes. So they would just sleep on clothes on the floor. There were people, maybe it's going to be a little bit too much, but I want you to fix on this point. There was a specific episode where this person had so much clothes, that when they got the people from the show to clean it up, they found rats dead beneath, buried under a pile. It's like, it was disgusting. And when I saw this, all these people before that, when they interviewed them, they were normal people. They had families, some were married, some were normal. But then something broke up, divorce, death in the family. And they just didn't know how to live their life. They just were completely broken. And they knew, but they couldn't change themselves. And they just started buying stuff to fill themselves. And it doesn't matter how much you buy, it was never enough. And in the same way, how much do we seek fulfillment in something that we know it doesn't satisfy, but we still do it anyway? We know that it's not healthy, but it seems that it's out of our control. It almost seems like an addiction to find pleasure anywhere but God. And this is the power of sin. So many times we think about sin just like temptation and failure, but this power to enslave, to twist our mind, to take our freedom, that's the real power of sin. And I don't think we look seriously enough about how it can control our lives. Our heart, we think it's clean, but honestly, how many of us do we hoard sins, pride, jealousy? How much of us we know that we have a problem and we just ignore it and say, well, I have other parts of my life in control. It's just going to take time, and we just shove it under this huge rug that has infinite space beneath it. And we just can keep on throwing more sin, more problems, more broken dreams, and we just sweep it under it. And we think that one day, no, there's not one day, it will never come back. We just sweep it under and think everything's going to be okay. It's easier to hide things than to actually get working on them. And Josiah knew the real power of sin and how difficult, how you cannot negotiate with it. It was all or nothing. So Josiah started his spiritual journey first by cleansing through the thing that causes men to sin. He'd take all of this. Temptations, start just destroying it. Cleansing, purging, these are strong words. But I want you to pay attention a little bit now. I'm going to go a little bit historical, but I just find amazing how little sometimes we pay attention to historical background, to context. I just like those moments. And Josiah, he was king of Judah and Jerusalem. So kind of a quick recap, how that the kingdom of Israel began. It began with the first king. It was Saul, then David, Solomon, then the kingdom divided. And when the kingdom divided, we have two countries, two kingdoms, Judah and Israel. And sometimes it gets confusing because it's which Israel are you talking about? And sometimes, even when you refer to Jerusalem as Judah, and it gets just a mess. So he was king of Judah. He was king of only two tribes, Benjamin and Judah. Then there was another king of the northern tribes, of the other 10 tribes. I don't know them all by head, but all tribes that are not Judah and Benjamin, northern tribes, northern kingdom. So Josiah started cleaning. We see here in the text, on verse 3, he began to purge Judah and Jerusalem. Great. But then we have something that, when I read it, just blew my mind. Verse 5, he burned the bones of the priests on their altars, so he purged Judah and Jerusalem. his kingdom, in the towns of Manasseh, Ephraim, and Simeon, as far as Naphtali, and in ruins around them. He tore down the altars and the Asherah poles. So this king kind of was acting outside his jurisdiction. Some would even say that he was invading and forcing his will to somebody else's people. That is something that I think we need to take our time. First of all, because even some translations on verses 6, they say that when he was cleaning the lands of Naphtali, they add one word, with access. So kind of a more violent military way. So this king was acting outside his kingdom. And while we are not kings, and we do not live in biblical times, and we cannot just go opening the doors of our neighbors and throwing away stuff that we don't agree with. We cannot be that type of people. There's something for us to learn there. There was, like I told you, an internal sanctification when he cleansed his kingdom, but there was an external sanctification when he took a position against idolatry, even through lands that were not theirs. So to clearly make you understand the importance of an external sanctification, I want to tell you about my dog. I'm a huge nerd, and my dog is a Scottish Terrier, so his name is Knox. Some of you got it. So I thought that was pretty cute, and I had a German Shepherd that was called Luther, so it was like from one dog to the another, so kind of nerd like that. But this dog, I love him. He's small, he's very cute, but I don't know why it's like his quilt, his long, furry mustache. When he goes out, the dog always has fleas. Always. We took all the rugs from our house, put hardwood floor, we bought the little collar, we give him the bath, we give him the food, and he still always has fleas. Because it doesn't matter how much we bathe him, how much we take care of him, even if we put absolutely everything that the vet said, if there are fleas in the dog park, we're done. There's nothing we can do. And they're always coming back. It's so depressing. And you just see the dog scratching himself. It's like, is there anything we can do? Not really. Even if I do everything by the book, he still gets fleas. So, interestingly, I was reading about the fleas at that time, and they take 6 months to hatch. They can live 6 months as an egg with no food, not even close in like on the dog's fur. They can live 6 months if they fall in your rug or in the floor. And find in a poetically way that many times our attitudes, they can take months to hatch sin. We think they're harmless, but at most we can say they're harmless at that time. It's only a matter of time before things get out of control. Then somehow, when we look at sin, we think that it's so easy for us to take over it. In the Old Testament, Israel, when he conquers the land, it is told that they need to cleanse all the land. They need to kill everybody. That's not something that is easy to preach today, but that was what he said. They had to take an extreme solution to the problem. Kill everybody, women, slaves, children, kill all the animals, burn down everything. And they didn't. And the Asherah poles, no matter how many good kings like Josiah decide to take them down, just like bad weed, they just keep popping over and over. And they just try to cleanse it out. And one generation goes, and then, once again, idolatry takes over the land. And sure, it's a little bit extreme. We don't live this way now. But I want you just to understand that at that moment in history, God was treating Israel very much as we treat our children. If I live by the rules that my father taught me when I was 5 years old, I could not function as a normal human being. Like, imagine a 4-year-old person that still doesn't speak to strangers. But we teach extreme measures to our children to keep them safe. They're not to be treated as always like that, but at that specific moment, there's such a high price to pay that God did take extreme measures to teach them, to help them. So it's not something that we have to say it need to be lived this way, hating our neighbors today. But it was something that could have saved so much heartache, so much sin in Israel. And sadly, we feel embarrassed by these strong, opinionated texts, and we don't talk about them, and we just ignore them. There's some beauty in it. It's a God who's giving these amazing rules to their children because he loves them. He's cared for them. He wants to take care of them. And the New Testament has a little bit about these same rules. Read in 1 Corinthians 5, a list about people that Paul was the apostle of the Gentiles. He associated with everybody, but he said, there are some people that you cannot associate. And then he gives a list of some sins, especially sexual sins, and said, do not associate with those people. So even in the New Testament, we do not have the same attitude from destroy everything from your neighbors, but there's still this seed of, well, you have to love your neighbors, but do you know how? Do you know that even if you have to love them and preach to them and share the gospel, there's a limit? Because after a while, people will start making an influence in your heart. Be careful. It's not for everybody. It's difficult, and if you have more issues, it's something that has to be discussed case by case and prayed. Hopefully you have a counselor, a mentor that you can share with this. I'm not telling you either to not talk to everybody or just to share the gospel to everybody. I'm saying it's delicate because sin can entangle you. Be careful. It's not as black and white. It's difficult. It's problematic. We're not called to be monks living isolated in an unreachable monastery, but we are called to be careful to whom we open our hearts and decide to associate with. So when seeking God, our first item in the list was seek him internally. Josiah did this by cleaning Judah and Jerusalem. Then, when seeking God, we do this externally. And this is who we relate with, who we associate with, what are going to be our attitudes, what are going to be influencing outside. And our final item is we seek God in a more active way. Sanctification has two sides. If the commandment was do not worship other gods, you know who made great Christians? Atheists. If the command was simply do not worship other gods, atheists will pass the test by flying colors. But we know it's not like that. And Josiah understood this because once he cleansed everything, once he was sure that idolatry was not going to take over Israel at that time, he took attention and said, now, what are we going to do? He went to the temple. He said, we may not be idolaters now, but if we do not fix our relationship with God, it's only a matter of time before we go back. He knew the influence that the sin had over him, but we have I'm going to roughly translate, but we have this expression in Portuguese that says that if you have a blank mind, an empty mind, that's going to be the devil's workplace. Oficina vacía, oficina do diabo, in Portuguese. Just to make sure that I know. But it shows us how if we do not do something, sin is just waiting to slip in. It's time to repair the temple. First up, worshiping stuff, false gods, that was under control. Josiah made sure that they didn't do this anymore. But then, like the progressive nature is, now we worship the true God. Paul described our life as a race, a long marathon we're participating, and our goal is to arrive to the end and be found faithful. The parables tells us that at the end, God is going to judge us and say, were you a good and faithful servant? Come to my joy. He's going to judge this. It's not uncommon that we live our life thinking that just because we're Christian, we just sidestep this problem. And because we sidestep this problem, we start thinking that sin is not a serious business. The Ten Commandments show us this idea of active and proactive, being reactive to sin. But then Jesus paid attention to how easy we were to fool ourselves. He went on the Sermon on the Mount, and then he started explaining. You have heard that you should not commit adultery. Well, I tell you, it's just not committing adultery. It's about how you see other people. It was said in the Bible, do not hate each other. But then Jesus took it one step further and practically say, love your neighbor. The not commandments were the first step to get to a relationship with God. Sanctification, for us, is wrongly understood as, what did you stop doing? What sins did you abandon because you loved Christ? How was your life before knowing Christ? And what did you change when you get in a relationship with God? This is how we see sanctification. But there was a change. And I'm going to go sounding a little bit like Jonah. But we understand we live in a way that we think that being technically correct is better than being correct. Not using drugs does not make you a good citizen. Not cheating is not enough to be a good husband. Obedience to the law does not make you a good Christian. And we think just in these negative terms about what we have to stop doing. But Josiah thought about how he could positively improve his sanctification. What could he do to get closer to God? There's no secret to stop sinning. There are no 10 steps to becoming perfect. It's easy to lose our sight and just be worried about what I have to stop doing. But when we preach the gospel, how much time do we spend being negative? How many preachers ask questions? How many times did you pray every day this week? And whenever I heard that question, I just felt embarrassed by the weight of my failure. But my preachers growing up, my pastors, they put this weight on me, but they never told me, they never showed me the experience of reading the Bible and finding its beauty. They told me about how much I had to pray every day, but I never felt when I was growing up how perfect is your life for that moment when you throw everything on the floor of the cross and you say, I'm free, I'm yours. They make us feel bad sometimes. It's not their fault, it's because we live thinking in negatives. So I encourage you to find the beauty of the gospel, to find the blessings, to find a relationship with God that will fill your soul in a way that no human pleasure can. And this is where the gospel changes everything. Without Christ, the law will only condemn us. Without Christ, there is no way to the Father. It is Christ who opens everything, who clears the way for us to get closer to Him and truly seek Him and call Him our Father. Talking about inner life is difficult because if you take care of what you're doing, but you do not take care of your own heart, you eventually just become a hypocrite because you cannot feel the law, the commandments. If you only take care of your internal struggles, eventually, just like the parables of the seeds, the thorns of the world will exhaust you and it's going to just leave you lifeless. It's going to exhaust you. And if you live a life just about worrying about what you should not do or what you should do, and you do not seek God in an active, relational way, that's just legalism. So the appropriate way to seek God is, like I showed you in the very beginning with this book, is not finding one step, one way, focusing this part of your life. It's by finally understanding that a relationship with God takes all your time and all your life. You have to see God as something that covers every single area of your life. And actively seek Him in this fashion. Let me pray. Heavenly Father, first of all, I ask for forgiveness because so many times I have tried to seek You for my own conscience, for my own benefits. So many times I have prayed with You and just be worried about how long have I prayed, or if I haven't got too much sins to confess. So many times I come to Your presence on a Sunday worship just running late. I even confess that so many times I'm worshiping You in the communion of the church, but my head is thinking about lunch, about so many other stuff that is not as important as You. God, I ask for everybody who has prayed but still so many times feel that their prayers are empty. I pray for those that have so many times tried to worship You and just get bored by the music, that You may renew their hearts, renew their hope, that they understand that if they do not start by giving everything to You, they will never find pleasure in Your presence. I pray that all of us tonight, we may find You and we may delight in Your presence. In the name of Your Son, I pray. Amen.